to find their seats. Lovely to see you. Wait till everybody is settled. Good to see you this morning. Welcome if you are joining us online. It's lovely to have your company here as well. Thank you for making us part of your day. I trust you had a good evening last night. Where's Jenny? Where's Jenny? Where is she? Jenny was out very late last night with a lot of other people, so I hope you had a good night. And who else was I talking to? Peter from in the Netherlands, HAL 24K. Where's Peter? Fantastic, fantastic. I love this. Peter says whenever he's here, he likes to eat his way around Madrid. Yes, I think many of us can relate to that. Welcome. Thank you very much for being here nice and early this morning, ready to get started. Before we start, if you wouldn't mind getting out your phones for me again. Lovely, thank you. First of all, if you can make sure they're on silent. And there we go. You probably already have Slido saved into your phone from yesterday. It probably will remember it. But if not, or indeed if you are just joining us today, that will take you directly through to Slido. If you're joining us online and you can't quite scan the QR code, if you go to slido.com, then the hashtag that you need, the code for Slido, is ESMW 2023. European Soil Mission Week, ESMW 2023. Fantastic. Do ask your questions. We will try and answer as many as we can here on stage. It is another full day today. Let's have a look and see what we've got for you today. Lots of breakouts. So there's going to be a lot of deep dives into different parts of the sector, different challenges to look at, different parts of the industries. We will bring the reporting back from the breakouts as well. Incidentally, if you are watching us online, and obviously there is a break while the breakouts are happening, please do join us at 4:30 CET because we will report back from the breakouts. And then, of course, you have the two final sessions as well. So if you're joining us online, do come back after the breakout part. So yesterday we talked research, we talked policies, we then had a bit of an international flavour as well. We heard from some of the land managers. Today, we're very much going to focus on the local and the regional side of Mission Soil, plus the logistics of rolling out Mission Soil throughout the regions. So really how it's being done, who is being targeted, the response from it, and the plans going forward as well. So we're going to bring you an update on that. But we're going to start today by looking at the social, the cultural, and the economic transformations that are needed to improve the health of soils. It's not so much, or it's not just what is put into the soils or how the soils are looked after, but actually the wider context as well. So other things that are so vital when it comes to improving the health of soils. Delighted to have another member of the Mission Board with us today for this one, an environmental social scientist with expertise in agricultural and environmental knowledge. So, ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Associate Professor in Transdisciplinary Human Environment Relations at the University of Oulu in Finland, Anna Kusiewonczynska.
Thank you for the great introduction to the day and for attempting my surname. Always always a hard challenge. We spent some time in the morning practicing, which is great. Thank you very much for being here on the second day. I'm really delighted to be opening the second day with a talk that will try to think seriously through how are we actually going to do all of this stuff that we want to do. So there is going to be a little bit less quantitative data and a little bit more big ideas. As I am a social scientist, I think about social change, and our attempt to restore European soils to health is precisely that. We are talking about a social change, a cultural change, and an economic change. So we need some frameworks for thinking how to achieve this. I'm going to open with this, I think, well-known to all of you, visualization. And stressing the urgency of our action on soils, we often turn to quantitative assessments, such as this one. This is the most recent update to the Stockholm Resilience Institute Planetary Boundaries Diagram, which is a quantifiable measure of how the human society affects the hydrosphere, atmosphere, ecosphere, land. And as you can see in the land systems change part of this diagram, we are there also way beyond what is considered to be the safe operating boundaries for human society on the planet Earth, and into the zone of risk, danger, potentially, well, we hope that not a zone of no return. This is a usual alarming message that we're quite used to giving ourselves and perhaps the wider public. A different way, a different image, a different way into talking about the human impact on land systems and on our planet is through this image. This is a series of photographs taken of a piece of art, a piece of work by Matthew Moore, a conceptual artist, and also the fourth generation of a farming family. He grew up in the west of Phoenix, and he was the last of his family to farm the land. As metropolitan Phoenix grew exponentially, housing took place of agriculture. When his grandfather sold the last piece of the farmland, Moore created this piece called Moore Estates. This is a scaled replica of the plan for 253 homes that are going to be placed where once crops grew. And this is a very different approach to representing the environmental crisis, to representing the human agency within that crisis. Matthew Moore wrote about his work that he wishes to reveal consumer models that make us disobedient to our relationship with land and time. From my artwork, I reveal the impact of the American dream on society and the land. These kinds of images bring a different point of view to the planetary boundaries diagram. And these are no less powerful because of their specificity. And indeed, they may be more powerful because of their specificity. And for me, this specificity is important because it takes us back to the focus on place. It reminds us that the work of regenerating soils, just like the work of degenerating soils, of destroying land, so the work of regenerating them happens in specific places. It is place-based, and these places are already full of different processes and of different human populations. This is why I really like to think about soil through this framework provided by my colleague Professor Stephen Banward of the University of Leeds, the critical zone conceptualization, and I'm borrowing this diagram from Professor Steve Banward. For those of you who are not familiar with the critical zone way of thinking, the critical zone takes our attention away from thinking about environmental change on the scale of the planet and puts it in specific places. Because the planet is not a space of human experience. I don't know about you and I, but I don't feel that I live on a planet. I feel that I live in specific places and I make change in specific places. And this is where the critical zone really helps us to bring attention to these specific places. The critical zone is a space of livability between the top of the tree canopy and the top of the lithosphere. So the critical zone is where life happens. And this is where soils as living ecosystems are functioning as the heart of the critical zone. and they are ensuring the livability of the critical zone for humans as well as for other living beings. So we have here the vision of soils as ecosystemic actors that participate in the transfer of solar energy into ecosystems in the soil as well as the plant life. We have soils imprinting themselves onto waterways and managing the hydrology, and finally participating in the exchange with the atmosphere, and so creating a breathable atmosphere for us and for others. Let's not forget the non-human others. So I also like to do one more thing to Professor Stevens' diagram, and this is to populate it. Because as I say, these critical zone places are places that are inhabited by us, by humans. So we can't think about these ecosystemic functions without thinking about how they intersect and interact with human societies at all levels, how they are shaped by human societies, and how they shape societies in turn. We also can't think about the changes to these ecosystemic processes. We can't think about measuring these ecosystemic processes without making a connection to human activity. Then, when I was reading up in preparation for this talk about the planetary boundaries, I was also struck by this. The most recent elaboration of the planetary boundaries by the Stockholm Resilience Center for the first time is not only talking about a safe operating place, a safe operating space for humanity within the planet Earth. It is now also talking about a just operating space. By focusing on places and acknowledging that these places are populated by humans and as well as other living entities, we start really getting at this issue of justice. And I was struck that in this most recent interpretation of the planetary boundaries, Rockström and his colleagues are talking about these three aspects of justice. Interspecies justice, that when we are thinking of ecosystem change, soil restoration, we are not just thinking about justice for humans, but we're thinking about justice for other living beings. Then they also mention intergenerational justice. So not just the justice for the people who live now, but also for those who are coming. The famous 7-generation thinking. And finally, intragenerational justice. And we have already had some talk about this in the keynote yesterday from Catherine. We can't be exporting our soil problems. This is intragenerational justice, that justice can't be achieved in one place while exploiting another. Intergenerational justice tries to bring home this message that justice needs to appear in generations wherever they are placed. Another key document that is now really in trying to incorporate this thinking about justice into science policy is the 5th National Climate Assessment. This is an important document delivered by the US Global Change Research Program to the US Congress and the US President. This is basically the US variety of IPCC, the best science for environmental change. And this report now really stresses the importance of just sustainability. It recognizes that environmental justice is an issue for transformations and transitions to sustainability, and argues that policies need to be assessed in terms not just of their impacts on ecosystems, not just in terms of life cycle assessment, not just in terms of their economic cost and benefits, but also in terms of environmental justice. How do they recognize and how do they distribute the unequal responsibility for harm and for restoration? So here, I could talk much more about this, but I will just leave you with this diagram, and I'm happy to talk about these different dimensions of environmental justice with you later, perhaps in the break. So all of this is starting to give us some ideas about how to approach this question of sustainability as a social process. How do we improve soil health? we need to do some important foundational work on understanding how different areas of social life impact and connect with soils. And so I share this diagram, which is, let's say, quite a straightforward and commonly used way of thinking about, okay, how do we embed this question of soil health in social action? And it assumes that we have to understand how we can improve certain pre-existing relations. So, for example, we may consider the impact of crop diversification on soil microbiome health. Or we may think about techniques of removing microplastics from waste so that this waste can then be used on soil. Or we can think about changes to forest land management so that we maximize carbon sequestration. These are all important areas of work. They are also incremental in that they focus on specific questions within bounded contexts. They try to enhance sustainability within these existing systems. They are trying to do the same, or they're trying to do more of what we already have, but with less harm. But thinkers in sustainability in sustainability literature are increasingly arguing that we need not just transformation, but not just transition, but transformation. So not what we already have, but with less harm, but changing how we operate on all levels. And this means changes not just to the variables of that which makes existing relation, but transformations of ways of thinking, values, perceptions, meanings, and ways of interacting. And this means work not only within particular material flows, from forests to houses, from fields to plates, but also the associated institutional, cultural, economic, and political arrangements and power relations that make these relations possible, that make the forest travel, that makes the forest travel to our homes in a certain way. And here we're talking about different levels as well. We often talk about the behavior as this is what needs to change, but this only touches the individual level. We need to also address the collective and structural levels of social action. And this is why the social sciences, humanities, and the arts are really needed in trying to achieve environmental change towards sustainability, trying to achieve soil health change in Europe. And a good illustration, actually, of this attempt to connect soil science to societal change has been done by soil scientists such as Ratan Lal and Johan Bauma, and now has been even taken up by the FAO. And this is the rethinking of sustainable development goals as they pertain to the question of soil health. The sustainable development goals are basically a societal agreement on values. And this is why they offer a very good way into thinking about transformations of soil and society. So if we agree, for example, that access to clean, fresh water is something that we value as a society, then looking at this sustainable development goal, we can ask what action does this require from different groups, from different agents within society in relation to soils. Who is connected to soils in such ways that they impact on the achievement of this sustainable development goal? And what do we need to do to change not just behavior, but the number of systems that impact on us achieving this crucial societal value? So starting with sustainable development goals as values opens up the possibility for involving different areas of social, political, and economic life without presuming that we already know what the right point of entry is from the beginning. This process of transforming how we relate to our environment so that we achieve certain values, such as those expressed by the Sustainable Development Goals, is also a process that needs to be co-produced. And here again, I was very impressed by this US document, the Fifth National Climate Assessment, because there the co-production and necessity of co-production is very explicitly recognized. So while we have agreed that on what we want healthy soils, now we have to agree on how we get there. That's the job. That's the job in front of us. We have to agree on how we get there. And that needs to be a co-production process. And this point is very well articulated in this document, where it is very straightforwardly put forward to Congress that people's histories, educations, cultures, and ethics shape how they understand environmental change and what they perceive to be good mitigation strategies. And so scientific groups may have a different perception of what the causes of environmental change are, and therefore what changes are needed. So in this description, for example, the authors contrast the focus on greenhouse gases as the main driver of climate change, and therefore we need to address the greenhouse gas emissions. However, they point out that if you are living in a population that has been left out of the greenhouse gas producing part of the world, and rather you have been receiving the benefits or the negative impacts of these greenhouse gases, then you may see the social structures that create such inequality as the main reason for why the planet is on fire. And so you will want to address these social structures as one of the main ways forward, ways to mitigate climate change. But it's not just the end of the pipeline, but how the society is structured. So recognizing this diversity, and you may remember in one of my early slides, I had a picture from the farmers' protests that has been, paralyzing the Netherlands and causing significant rethinking of what politics are in the Netherlands. That image of the farmers coming to protest and coming into a political voice because they feel themselves impacted negatively by the kind of policies that are supposed to be making the world a better place for everyone. This really drives home the message that we have to have a very deep, sensible and broad dialogue on how we get to the sustainability transformations that we want to see. Otherwise, we are going to be in a situation of conflict. So what does this mean for research towards sustainability transformation? This means that we also need research on societal and cultural approaches to soils and how they can be transformed. So here I just wanted to give you a couple of examples of what that kind of research could look like. So on an individual level, we could ask, how do historical and current inequalities in access to green space impact on people's understanding of the role and value of soils in cities? How can these be changed and challenged? These inequalities, not people's perceptions, how these inequalities can be challenged so that everybody gets to experience soil health in urban life in a meaningful way, such as what our colleague from France is trying to achieve with her agroecology within the urban space experiments. On the collective level, we could ask, well, what are the collective values of foresters in understanding the role of soils? And how can we promote new forms of cultural norms and narratives that drive attention to soil health within forestry? Acknowledging that farming is not just a series of practices, it is also a culture. And finally, on a systemic level, as an example, what is the impact of globally traded food-based financial products on soil health? The derivatives and the financial derivatives that are based on the production of food. What is their impact on soil health? And how can we manage to change the financial structures that are also connected to land, ultimately connected to land? This is just to give you an illustration of a rather different approach to thinking about soil research. So this transformative work requires transdisciplinarity. And I'm also here to stress that we need to, and we are, moving beyond the model of speaking truth to power as the limitation of the responsibility of science. We need to move away from this idea that research can support societal change by talking numbers, by speaking truth to power. And I was very pleased actually yesterday that Francisco Javier Fuentes also raised this point in his opening speech. But this is not just enough to do good science and then tell politicians about it. We have to acknowledge that our science has a political impact through and through. We know that even in the most acute situations, such as when we have scientific predictors of environmental disasters, action doesn't necessarily follow from environmental scientists standing up and saying something bad is going to happen. So in relation to soils, we know that we need to move from speaking truth to power, to understanding the relationships, social, cultural, political, and economic dynamics that actually impact on soil health, and acting within these relationships. So this is an understanding of what is going on, what needs to be done, so that we can change it. And for those of you who are not familiar with transdisciplinarity, although I think that this is now a very shrinking group of people, transdisciplinarity is an approach to research that says, well, if we want to have transformation, then from the beginning we need to be working with the agents of transformation. So not lab to field, but lab and field together from the very beginning. Farmers, researchers, scientists together from the very beginning. Not research first and then telling people how to act, but from the onset, deciding questions, procedures, and outcomes of the research with those groups that we are tasking with changing, who are expected to somehow change their ways, individually, collectively, and structurally. And yesterday, again, we saw that these transformations are already occurring. We don't need to be inventing the wheel. The world is full of best practice examples of what can already be done. There are so many transformational spaces and activities in society already, living experiments, community-supported agriculture, farmers, socio-ecological justice movements, innovation groups such as Silver Pasture. I was just talking to John Gillian about this over coffee just a few minutes ago. That's some of the work that he's doing. Citizen science group around soil pollution and urban agroecology, as we saw yesterday, and many, many more. So it behooves us as researchers and scientists to recognize that these areas of work already exist in society and to ask what we can do to strengthen their capacities, what we can do to accelerate their transformation, because they already know what they're doing. And I'm really delighted that in the mission Soil, this transdisciplinary focus is very strong. You can see it throughout our research and innovation program. It is especially visible in the approach to living labs and lighthouses, which Muriel will be speaking about later today, so I won't labor the point too much. Soil literacy, communication, citizen engagement, this is also approached in a transdisciplinary way. And soil monitoring, we can talk more about how we can open this area of our work to transdisciplinary approaches as well. In the interest of time, I'm just going to skip through that one, and also in the interest of Muriel talking about transdisciplinarity in the living labs later today. But I was also asked by my colleagues from the mission board to talk a little bit about the arts and the impact of the arts. So I have stressed social sciences, also humanities, because, for example, anthropology falls under humanities, very open. But also we need to talk about arts, not just as a way to communicate research, not just a way to produce pretty infographics. This is the job for communication specialists. I'm sure that Sasha can put you in touch with excellent people. Soil art is much more than this. Art is research. Art generates new perspectives and insights about relationships between people and soils, and through this, it can have wide societal impact. If you want to know more about the amazing, societally changing soil art that is already happening, I very warmly recommend Field to Palette by my very good friend Alexandra Toland, which is a fantastic volume, and which really showcases soil art for societal change. And actually the first example from this book is the work by Agnes Dines Wheatfield, which already happened in 1982. And in this work, Agnes, well, she took a piece of land that is some of the most valuable soil in the world, a piece of Manhattan, and she turned it into a wheat field. She cultivated this wheat field for a year with the work and help of volunteers, and through this, she brought agriculture nature, the experience and the problems of farming life right into the heart of the city. And her impact is incomparable with any paper that I have ever written. Perhaps some of you could say differently, but certainly for me, what she has achieved with the wheat field is an exemplar of the kind of impact that socially conscious art, not communicative art, but art as research can have. And I urge you in your research projects to think about how this kind of impactful art could be actually incorporated. So to summarize my main messages from today, achieving soil sustainability requires a societal transformation. This is a transformation of our relations with soils at all levels, everywhere. And for us to achieve this, we have to actually build our understanding of the current social relations with soils in their cultural, economic, political, and other aspects. And then we have to understand how we can transform those. And this transformation requires transdisciplinarity. It requires working with the agents of change, research in society, and it is aided by arts as a source of new concepts and sensibilities. And I'm pleased to say that Mission Soil is promoting all of these approaches, and we hope to do a better job every year. Thank you.
Anna, thank you so much. Thank you, thank you. Sadly, we don't have time to take questions. However, would you be happy if people approached you during the next break? And fantastic, lovely. Do you want to grab that microphone? And talking of art, I don't know whether we can very quickly show what Coletta has been drawing for us while she's been listening to you, and whether we can see the graphic recording. We can. That's lovely. There we go. Fantastic. Look at that. Superb. And I have to say, I don't know whether I'm the only one, but I'm certainly going on Google later to go and have another look at the wheat field, because it is absolutely,
it's worth checking
it is absolutely wonderful. And I'm just going to say Anna Kay this time, and it is your brand. Anna Kay, thank you so much for joining us. Thank you.
Thank you.
Absolutely wonderful, and there is just an ant that has just appeared on that one as well. So, ladies and gentlemen, what we are going to do now is take a look at the how. Anna has given us an amazing idea of sort of that context of how to engage people and why, and the importance there. But let's now look at the logistics and actually get into the mechanics of how people should be engaged and what is happening there. So I'm delighted that we're now going to spend the next session with PREPSOIL. As you know, they facilitate the deployment of Mission Soil across the European regions, that knowledge sharing and the co-learning. So we're going to get a bit of an overview first of what PREPSOIL has been doing. So delighted to welcome the project manager to stage, Lina. Lina, fantastic. Lina, yours.
Thank you so much, and good morning, everyone. Before I start, I'd like to express a really big thank you to CSIC, who's hosting this event, and particularly to Pablo Gomez, who has been a really impressive support and great efforts in organizing this event, and also on behalf of our coordinator, Niels Hallberg, who could not be here today. I'd also like to thank the European Commission and DG AGRI for pulling the many strings in organizing this event. These kinds of events for further collaboration or enabling these collaborations among especially us projects, I think it's very beneficial. And PREPSOIL as a coordination and support action for us, it's very important to come out, of course, together with other projects, to talk about what we do, learn from others. And essentially, that's what coordination and support actions are about, to improve the cooperation between European member states and also strengthening the cooperation in the European research area. So I'll start by by setting the scene. We've heard this now several times, but for us it's also very important because that was the starting point. PREPSOIL was one of the first projects funded under the mission in a series of many, many projects, also to come, of course, to understand that healthy soils, they provide these very essential ecosystem services that are very nicely depicted in this representation from the implementation plan. That clean water, that flood regulation, healthy soils are a habitat for biodiversity. We know they are major carbon reservoirs. They also provide the foundation for human infrastructure, and most of all, and very importantly, they also form the basis of our cultural heritage. But we also know that soils are threatened in Europe and globally because of a range of human activities, which is aggravated by climate change. Now, the mission states that the lack of knowledge, awareness, and education of soil health among different stakeholders affects its capacity to provide these essential ecosystem services, and that insufficient access to data and knowledge and a lack in capacities for monitoring soil health hampers the achievement of soil health. So, responding to this intervention logic of the mission, PREPSOIL's main objectives are to facilitate the deployment of the mission across European regions through the creation and rollout of tools and spaces for interaction, through knowledge sharing and co-learning to improve soil literacy, communication, and engagement spaces. Also, by taking stock and learning from previous initiatives, and through entering into dialogues with a multitude of stakeholders to understand how regional assessment of soil needs, supported by harmonized monitoring mechanisms, can then lead to action in living labs and lighthouses. So in this first part of the session, I'll give you an overview of what PREPSOIL does, focusing particularly on the activities we carry out, represented in the middle of this visual, to improve soil literacy, communication, and fostering the creation of engagement spaces. And thereafter, you'll hear about the soil needs assessments that have recently been carried out. They will be presented by Saskia Kiestra. She will talk about identifying soil needs and the regional approach taken in PREPSOIL. Then you will hear from Katharina Helming, who will talk about the method and the key results from the soil needs assessments in 20 European regions. And finally, I'll come back and talk about the implementations for stakeholder interactions, for monitoring, for living labs, and policy advice. So in PREPSOIL, we have 20 consortium partners that represent 11 EU member states and one associated country, Norway. And we have the participation, or through the participation of many network organizations and umbrella organizations, we are present in all EU member states and most associated countries. We also both have multidisciplinary academic partners, but also these umbrella organizations that represent specific groups, such as farmers, forest managers, and also regional and local authorities. As I said, PREPSOIL began 1.5 years ago, almost, in the summer of 2022, and it's running until the summer of 2025. So, the mission's approach to systemic innovations require that local and regional communities work together. And that requires, in turn, that we act on various stakeholder interaction structures at all geographic levels. And as a coordination and support action, PREPSOIL has adopted a very proactive approach to co-creating with multiple stakeholders with the purpose of generating long-lasting interaction spaces for them. So by that, we reach out to land managers and owners and farmers, academic experts and organizations, but also to initiatives such as NGOs. And finally, we reach out to citizens and local stakeholders, connecting them and inspiring them to take action to improve the citizen awareness and, of course, the literacy effort. So PREPSOIL is structured around what we call 3 main impact pathways that overall contribute to the mission's goals and objectives. And through these impact pathways, PREPSOIL works towards increasing soil literacy, awareness, and societal appreciation. We also work towards improving the knowledge base and access to critical information. And finally, through the last impact pathway, we work towards preparing and supporting effective mission deployment. In the next slides, I'll then outline the more detailed activities we do to generate these impacts. So PREPSOIL is contributing to increasing soil literacy, awareness, and societal appreciation by engaging with multiple communities of practice from very many different regions. We do so through inspirational video dialogue, interviews with stakeholders that represent communities of practice, but also living labs or other specific land use related projects. And in these interviews, which you can find on our YouTube channel, you can hear about these stakeholders. They describe the means, the methods and experiences vis-à-vis establishing healthy soils. They are also talking about how they seek to advance sustainability within agriculture, but also urban gardening spheres and other land uses. We have interviews with community gardens or local gardening initiatives, farmer networks, also a group of dedicated stakeholders that discuss the challenges of soil health in their specific region. And also some also talk about the challenges or the opportunities of setting up a living lab. Our partners talk to these communities of practice, how their initiative started, how these activities relate to better soil management, and how and which practices they implement to improve soil health. They also talk about the challenges they've experienced and also if and how they have been inspired by other practitioners. And overall, these videos are made to engage into dialogues with these communities of practice, but also to raise awareness about soil health to citizens and society at large, but also as a means of engaging and as for them to serve for inspiration for others towards other communities of practice. We also have, besides the communities of practice, a larger engagement process to increase literacy. And for that, we're reaching out to what we call soil advocates. And we do so through an open call for participation of individuals that can be farmers or foresters, advisors or scientists or teachers or journalists that see themselves as soil advocates. And they can express through this call their interest and they can voluntarily contribute to the soil literacy effort. And since the call was launched, we actually experienced quite large interest. We have more than 100 volunteers, and we try to keep them engaged through the interviews, but also by collecting feedback on the spaces and the tools we developed, and also collecting feedback to these platforms. Also part of the pathway towards increasing soil literacy and awareness, PREPSOIL has an open call for best teaching practices for healthy soils for teachers from primary to secondary schools, for them to share best practices and inspirational materials. And this call, which is open on an annual basis, has the intention to collect sources of information that is suitable for soil literacy, but also to allow teachers and educators to identify best practices of soil education and eventually for them to learn from each other and from each other's experiences, and then to pave the way for a better inclusion of soil health in educational contexts. In the breakout session that follows immediately, you will hear more about these open calls and the various best practices collected. Through the second pathway, PREPSOIL has created a knowledge hub, which is a one-stop shop for soil health. It's a multilingual repository, and to date, actually, there's no example of such a pan-European repository which can be used to increase societal literacy and awareness. And therefore, PREPSOIL is making the effort to gather and collect various sources of information, educational material for both formal and informal education, but also inspirational materials for those groups working on awareness raising. The repository is open for everyone to submit materials. We also have an editorial board that ensures that the materials are categorized as detailed as possible, so as to make the user experience as easy as possible. The Knowledge Hub is structured, as I said, to provide easy access to information in multiple languages, and it's organized with the user needs in the center. So therefore, you can go to the Knowledge Hub and you can filter for different categories. You can filter for the land use, for country, for language, but also type of content, with the option to look for best practices, tools, education and training material, from primary throughout to higher education materials. You can look for interviews, policy documents, from international through to EU, and also science-based policy advice. And finally, you can find scientific informational material, including publications and articles. We also have different materials or in different media formats, such as audio files, document slides, videos, and websites. Of course, also you can filter for the 8 soil mission objectives. And finally, there's the possibility to filter for sources, so that you can find the material that has been produced for the various soil mission projects. Submissions are very welcome and also highly encouraged, so that we together can ensure that stakeholders can have easy access to knowledge and various types of informational and educational material in their language. Thirdly, we work towards developing interactive spaces for effective mission deployment. And to that end, PREPSOIL has developed what we call the forum. This is a web-based discussion area for different kinds of stakeholders, for communities of practice, soil advocates, as I talked about, living labs, but also others, where they can engage in discussions, they can network, exchange knowledge, interact, share documents. And so throughout the project, partners will initiate various discussions on topics related to the activities in the project, such as science to policy or soil monitoring, but also through the many different stakeholder interactions to encourage further interaction in this web-based forum. So with this outline of the tools and the spaces that PREPSOIL has developed for interaction, for knowledge sharing, for co-learning among multiple stakeholders, to improve soil literacy, as you see here in the middle, and raise awareness, I'll give the floor to Saskia Kiestra. She will talk about the identification of soil needs and the approach taken within PREPSOIL.
Okay, thank you very much. So yeah, my name is Saskia Kiestra. I'm working at Wageningen Environmental Research and part of PREPSOIL as the lead of Work Package 2, which was about the soil needs assessment. So the soil needs assessment, just get rid of this paper so I can see. So the objective of this specific work package, part of the work that we are doing in PREPSOIL, is to identify the existing soil needs in contrasting regions across Europe and associated countries. So to be able to represent the main European pedoclimatic zones and different land uses. Then, of course, we needed to define what is a soil need. So, because a soil need, of course, is a bit of a vague term. So we, just like it's soil health, but now everybody knows more or less what we mean with soil health. But soil needs was something new. So we define soil needs as the requirements from existing and emerging socioeconomic and geo-biophysical perspectives that determine soil health and related services to human society. So basically this means that it's not only what the soil would need, but also what we would need from the soil. So to be able to do that, we were to select these different regions, of course, to have this overview of the different pedoclimatic zones and land uses, and to assess the soil needs, and then to provide to provide a starting point for recommendations and priority actions to be implemented in the living labs and lighthouses that we are currently also already waiting for the results for where they're the first ones are going to be. So the selections of the regions, so the representative regions, again, that was not so easy thing to answer because, you know, what is a representative region? Is it representative of what currently is Europe, or what is representative of what we would like Europe to become in the future? So how big such a region should be? Would it be a NUTS 2 or NUTS 3 or something that is more like a catchment? So that all these questions were things that we discussed in the beginning of our project. So we defined finally that a region would be a region where a specific land use would dominate and interact with other land uses that would be there. Because of course, when a region is relatively big, then you could never have just one land use totally. But would have a common driver that would cause the current unsustainable situation of the land and the soil and the land management. And then there should also be a sustainable management practice that is currently being implemented or being planned that we could work with and talk with the stakeholders there. So also this representativity should reflect all the different soil threats that we have, should have all the different types of drivers such as climate change, different land uses, different land management types, different socioeconomic conditions, a good spread over Europe, and also to have some accessibility to stakeholders that we already knew as a consortium. So then that was not that easy. So first we went to make this table with the different land uses that we actually had. So to see what was the space that we would need to cover, other than that we would need to cover also the geographical regions of Europe. So we made this diagram here on the right-hand side. So you see the diagram with the urban and industrial soils in one end, then the natural and forest soils on the other end, and in the other corner, the agricultural land. And we identified these different land uses that we would like to ideally have represented in our soil needs assessment. So we came up with all these different things, and then we found also that we do actually want to have also some regions in which different types of land uses are both represented. So we call these our mixed land uses. So then finally we came up with this representation. Finally we had 20 regions in which we had regions that were representing natural and forestry land use, urban and industrial spaces, agricultural space, and these mixed land uses, as you can see. And then we found also that we could not really support to do this only with the partners that we had. So we actually included also several partners outside of our consortium that we asked to help us with this soil needs assessment. Because of course, if you want to do a good soil needs assessment in, for instance, Turkey, then you cannot go as a Dutch person to go there and ask the stakeholders in Turkey. So we had to ask for help from somebody from there. So this finally what we ended up with. So I don't have time to go through this, but actually we have all this information on 20 posters. It's also on the website, but the 20 posters are also in the other building. I think it's C? Building C? Sorry? Okay. Anyway, I didn't hear that. Anyway, for each of these regions, we made guidelines to ask the people to do something similar so that the results would also be easier to synthesize. So in each region, there was a workshop done with as many different types of stakeholders that we could contact, and about 10 targeted interviews with specific members of the society in each of these regions. The outcomes of these workshops were a synthesis report of the soil needs and the drivers of change in each one of these regions. And anyway, so this is some impressions of the actual workshops that we did. So some of them, they were done in the field, other ones were done more in a closed area. And then all this information that will be more explained better by the next speaker is represented in these 20 posters. There's also a little booklet that you can pick up to read some of the information that we have summarized in this booklet for each one of the regions. And in the afternoon, we will have a breakout session where we have identified 4 case studies as an example. Of course, we would like to show you everything, but we don't have time for that. So, one for the agricultural land use, one representing the forest and nature land use, one for urban and industrial, and one a mixed zone as well. So I would like to invite you to come after the coffee breaks, actually not in the afternoons, after this coffee break, to come to our PREPSOIL soil needs assessment breakout. Thank you. Then the next one will be Katrina, but you can do that. Oh, wait, I had this. So these are the posters that are on the website that you can have a look at. Thank you.
Yes, good morning, everyone. Thank you, Saskia. My name is Katharina Haumek. I'm from Leibniz Center for Agricultural Landscape Research in Germany. And I am proud to present the first results of our soil needs assessment now. First of all, thanks to the many people that were involved in the assessment, Lucas Bayer as the key person here, Pablo, many others in the 20 regions that we had to analyze. First, some repetitions from what Saskia said, the definitions. Saskia already brought them up. Soil needs. You can analyze soil needs from perspective of soils. What does the soils need to maintain and improve health? You can analyze it from perspective of the land managers. What do they need to manage the land such that soil health is improved? And you can analyze it from the perspective of society. What does society need to take from soils? What are the services? So we tried to really integrate it all and looked at it from existing and emerging, also looking at the future, socio-economic and biogeophysical perspectives that determine soil health and related services. So with this, we took a systems approach to the interaction. We took a regional approach. We took a participatory approach. I come to that in a second. And we took a scalable approach. The protocol we developed for analyzing the soil needs was meant to be replicable, implementable in other regions as well, and in particular in the living labs. So the approach, the analytical framework we took for analyzing soil needs is the so-called DIPSIR approach. Many of you will know it, developed by the OECD originally and used a lot also in many other studies. It is to analyze the human-environment interactions in certain systems, and in this case in soil. So it takes an analysis of the drivers that improve soil health management, and here the drivers you can also analyze as barriers or promoting agents, the pressures, which is actually acting on the soils, the soil management. Here I have a picture from agriculture. Then the state is actually the soil health itself, which has an impact for instance, on ecosystem services, on resource use efficiency, on service that we need from the soils as society. And finally, the response that is done by us, by society, to improve the circle in favor of soil health. So we had to analyze all these different aspects in our soil health assessment, soil needs assessment. The 20 regions, Saskia already showed them. Dominant land uses, we tried to capture all the environmental zones. We tried to capture a variety of soil types. We tried to capture a variety of soil threats, soil objectives, to put it all together. So how did we do that? First of all, in all the 20 regions, we followed a same protocol in order to be able to synthesize the results at the end, which is difficult with the 20 regions. We did a literature study, expert assessment on the soil needs. We did a stakeholder inventory, a stakeholder mapping to then invite stakeholders for workshops and interviews to discuss and validate the literature results, to explore future visions. That was really important for us to look into the future. What are the future opportunities to improve soil health, to develop a transformation into soil health management, and to elucidate the perspectives of barriers and opportunities for soil health transitions. At the end, we summarized it all. And this is an impression, again, of the stakeholder workshops here as an example in Germany, in Poland, Sardinia, Italy, and in Spain. And on the right side, you can see the overall composition of the stakeholders. We worked hard to involve all stakeholder types here: policy and government, research, the advisory and other advisors, farmers, land users by itself, business representatives, and civil society organizations, NGOs, and so forth. And altogether, we had like more than 500 stakeholders in our 20 regions involved, spreading the voice of soil health and engaging everyone into the assessment of the needs of soils. This picture is a bit busy. It shows the 20 regions in the rows and the soil health objectives in the columns. You will not be able to read the soil health objectives, but you will now know them by mind, I would think, all the 9 objectives. And what you can see here is that there is not one region, one soil objectives, or one region, one soil health problem. It's a very mixture and combination of all the soil objectives and problems. Maybe you can see that for the urban and post-industrialized areas on the bottom, the objective of soil organic carbon is not that prominent as compared to all the other regions. Here, contamination plays a big role, and also degradation. For the agriculture, forestry, and mixed land uses, there is always a big combination of the soil health objectives. Mostly mentioned is the soil organic carbon, soil erosion, the soil structure, soil biodiversity, and least mentioned, of course, is in this approach the global impact, the global footprint of soils. Of course, this takes a different approach to manage, and this is something to do for the future. A look at the drivers. We have a combination of policy, economy, social, cultural, environmental, and technology drivers. And here I listed just a few. For the policy economy, of course, the common agriculture policy in the agriculture sector is the key part, but also things of bureaucracy is a very important thing, in particular in implementing things such as the agri-environmental measures and so. Sunk investments and path dependency is also a very important thing. We have investments here in a long cycle, much different from other economic sectors. So in developing a transformation, in introducing transformation, we need more time than maybe in other sectors. That's a key point. Then, of course, climate change was popping up everywhere. Climate change is the key driver with different outcomes, of course. You know it all: droughts, rainfall, too much rainfall, too little rainfall, rainfall at the wrong time, freezing, thawing cycles. So climate change is everywhere. Fires, floods, invasive species is something that is coming up increasingly, and land scarcity on the other side. On the social cultural side, we have the migration, the out-migration from the rural areas into the cities, which leads to abandonment and respective soil degradation. But we have also very positive developments, such as ecotourism, which really can drive into a diversification, for instance, in the forestry sector, but also in the agricultural sector, to develop new economic opportunities, thereby improving soil health. We have the dietary preferences, which is a very big driver for the agriculture sector, and the community activities that also drive into soil health. Anna was already elaborating on that as a key point that can be taken up to collaborate jointly in the regions on improving soil health. And then we have all the technology developments, digitalization and everything that is related to that. Also the communication that is coming along with digitalization, which helps us, for instance, implementing new value chains in the different sectors. And of course, digitalization was seen as a key, as one, yes, key solutions for improving soil health as long as it is governed through policies that manage the right direction of the implementation of digitalization, so that it is not only used for improving efficiency, economic efficiency in production, but that it is also utilized for improving ecosystem services. So I now come to some of the synthesis for the different land uses. Of course, you can see that with 20 regions, the regional differentiation is very high. Every region has a different problem setting, although the drivers may be the same, the way they impact on soil health is different, and also the solutions are different. So we overall tried to bring it all together, but you have the different regional analysis also in the booklet that was mentioned. So on agriculture, one of the key points is that we kind of have the solutions. We know how to manage soil in favor of soil health. Diversification of the cropping system, managing the landscape, introducing linear elements, covering the soil, but the barriers and the barriers are too high. And first of all, the economic barriers are there. In some parts, it's also the policies. The Common Agriculture Policy still as, yes, I mean, the Common Agriculture Policy has brought very good impacts in terms of food security, in terms of rural prosperity, in terms of life conditions, but it has also triggered soil health deterioration. And one way to remove, redesign the common agriculture policies into supporting ecosystem services would be a key point towards soil health. The integration of agroecological principles with modern technologies, not either or, we need it all together. And also to acknowledge the cultural identity, the sense of ownership and sense of belonging in an area in order to trigger the intrinsic incentives to improve soil health. But we have to consider the past dependencies on land use history, which makes it really difficult to implement this transformation. On the forestry and land use and natural land use, of course, this is also a very high diversity of different land uses. In the north, it's often the peatlands. Peatlands, of course, is discussed a lot in terms of climate change mitigation, carbon, soil organic carbon sequestration. This is extremely important, but we need to consider the watershed around the forestry, of course. And if we want to improve soil organic carbon in the forestry and to remodel the forestry, we have also to consider possible drainages in the agricultural fields surrounding it. So it really takes a watershed approach. The forest management, adaptation to climate change, there is very good examples coming up, in particularly in the north. To avoid soil compaction, which is increasingly a problem when the soil is not frozen enough anymore in many times. And also in the south and in the north, the development on ecotourism popped up as something which is really a triggering element towards environmental integration, towards soil health improvement in diversified forest management. The urban and industrial areas. Here, nature-based solutions and de-sealing where possible to limit excessive heat and rainfall. There is many community activities. Of course, the areas are more densely populated. There is very important activities from bottom up that can support the transition process. Novel approaches in housing, which limit land take and soil sealing. And also the replacement of economic activities in the post-industrial areas is well, a major undertaking. Also maybe activities to increase soil organic carbon in the former industrialized areas. This is extremely costly, much more costly than in agricultural areas. But as I think Jean-François Susanna yesterday pointed out, there's a lot of money in this kind of investment, and maybe there is room for improvement to develop new ideas to also increase the environmental integrity, soil organic carbon in former industrialized areas. The mixed land use areas was mainly on marginal lands, in high altitudes, in remote areas, in very moist areas. And here, outmigration was a big problem, the abandonment of the land, which leads to soil health deterioration if not accompanied by measures. And here, access to training and cooperation is among the most important things to manage to try to reverse the rural exodus and pay attention to rural renewal and introduce long-term tenure systems also to support the sustainable management of the land. Okay, as a synthesis of the synthesis, if you, sorry. As a synthesis of the synthesis, the understanding of the soil needs requires understanding of the human-environment interactions. I think that is extremely clear, and the socio-economic part is probably the most triggering for improving soil health. Improving soil means addressing the causes, the drivers, and not the symptoms as such only. And the consideration of regional configurations, of course, is extremely necessary. And we think with the approach we took, we have a method that can be also implemented in other areas as a starting point for work in living labs and involving stakeholders to really develop pathways for transition to soil health. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. Thank you. So some really, really interesting things there, and just underlying how important it is to get that social synthesis. So to wrap it all up and just to go through what PREPSOIL is doing next, Lena, would you like to come? There you are. Fantastic. Would you like to come and give us your conclusion? Thank you.
Okay. So, so coming back to the first overview I gave about PREPSOIL and what we do to, on the one hand, generate these spaces for stakeholder and citizen engagement, and also for developing tools for interaction and co-learning and building awareness to back up the mission's implementation plan, and from Katharina and Saskia's presentation on the appraisal of soil needs at the regional level. Here in this last outline, I'd like to talk about the activities that will provide direction and also capacities for the future soil health monitoring mechanisms, and also for mapping and preparing the implementation of regional living labs, science to policy interface, and strengthening stakeholder interactions. So the mission's approach to systemic innovation that requires, as I said in the beginning, that local and regional stakeholders, they work together and that they create communities for participatory actions at the local level to mobilize actors across society in more systematic ways. And as the soil needs assessments have shown, that living labs, they are a well-chosen systemic tool for the mission to support these interactive and participatory systems with a strong citizen and stakeholder involvement. And with the target to establish 100 regional living labs and lighthouses, as such place-based co-creation and innovation ecosystems, as they are called, PREPSOIL has been careful to take these stock-taking efforts and to gather from previous experiences with living labs and lighthouses. And following from these stock-taking efforts, you will find on our website a map of living labs and lighthouses. This map was actually initially initiated by the SMS project, and since then taken over by PREPSOIL on the review process to refine the map and also supplement it with further living labs, including those also collected through a self-registration form. So currently the map serves as an inspiration for networking. There is contact information. There are also filtering options for land use types. And also, besides this, a self-assessment tool is being developed and will be published soon to assess the maturity level of living labs and lighthouses, and also to support them in identifying areas for improvement. What we also do is to work with living labs to directly collaborate with them in generating model business plans through so-called co-creation workshops with them. One recently took place physically in Brussels, and more, both online and physical, will take place in the spring of next year. And drawing from these co-creation workshops, there will be conclusions on model business plans that reflect the different contexts of living labs and lighthouses, including also their state of maturity, and cooperation forms, innovation approaches. And eventually, based on these co-creation workshops, a service package will be designed with a set of recommendations for the mission. In terms of monitoring, PREPSOIL partners contribute to improving the knowledge base for the soil monitoring framework by evaluating how to extend results on agricultural soil indicators to other land use types, natural forest, urban industrial soils, by taking stock of experiences from existing national studies, but also other EU projects, including EJP Soil, the SMS project and Holy Soil project, and also through dialogue with member states and EUSO on their vision of soil monitoring. And this will then be synthesized in a report due next spring on national and EU soil monitoring systems for all land use types. Furthermore, as part of the efforts to explore and exploit new opportunities for soil monitoring arising from advances in other fields, PREPSOIL partners are also evaluating the potential contribution of satellite-based Earth observation techniques to enrich monitoring data in space and time. Also, partners are exploring how citizen science and crowdsourced data and other data coming from living labs and lighthouses can enrich data monitoring in space and time. And for this purpose, partners are developing a mobile app to allow citizens to provide data and report back to the projects on their soil observations, and eventually also test this app with living labs in case studies to also assess the potential of using citizen science in soil monitoring. And finally, in terms of monitoring, partners will work to identify and fulfill capacity building needs of decision makers and public officers, also including living labs, to assess the monitoring outputs. So partners will evaluate the capacity building needs, also in response to the mission, of these key target groups, and set up pilot training workshops to improve their knowledge based on soil health monitoring. And we will, of course, these course and training materials will be available in the Knowledge Hub I talked about before, and also a discussion group will be set up in the forum among soil monitoring officers to foster exchange among these. In terms of science policy interface, it's very important that we materialize the policy feedback from the project and also the key results of the soil needs assessments. And we do so by developing or elaborating science to policy interface protocols to support the mission activities at the regional and the national level, including also living labs. And we do so by developing best of practice methods for science to policy interface and advice. We do so by developing guidelines for consecutive steps for policy interface interaction. And finally, we will do so by pilot testing in 4 to 6 of the living lab regions to define methods and also ensure wider utilization, aiming for scientifically informed policymaking, connecting science to policy. And finally, as you've seen, PREPSOIL is organizing these multi-level stakeholder interactions and engaging with a multitude of stakeholders at different levels, from the EU to national to regional and local level. We do so through dialogues with living labs and lighthouses that will start now in the spring. We also do so through these pilot testings, for instance now with the mobile app, and also through case studies and workshops. Initially, partners made a dedicated stakeholder mapping and engagement procedure. And currently, partners are planning how the current EJP soil hubs can be expanded into wider multi-actor forums at national level that can drive member state discussions and actions revolving around the mission. So these various stakeholder engagement activities are meant to foster awareness around soil health among these multitude of stakeholders and to provide easy access to knowledge through the Knowledge Hub and also through the forum. And so with this outline, I hope you've gotten an impression of what we do in PREPSOIL, what we do to facilitate the deployment of the mission, generating these engagement spaces to raise awareness and the literacy effort, to provide knowledge, and also by evaluating soil needs in many different regions and defining priorities, most of all, for action in living labs. If you stay for the breakout session, you will hear much more about these soil needs assessment. As Saskia said, about 4 regions. You will hear testimonies from them. Also on our website, there's a very nice depiction of all the workshops with blog posts also from the workshops. There's also contact information, and in the cloister you can see all the different posters from the soil needs assessments, and we have this very nice booklet also. Also in the breakout session you will hear much more about the educational contents, about the call for best practices in teaching materials. And yeah, I can only invite you to visit our website, prepsoil.eu, and to explore more of our spaces and tools. So with this, I'd like to thank you for the attention.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you. Gosh, what a lot of information. I have to say the Innovation Hub, the Knowledge Hub, looks absolutely superb, particularly as it is so searchable. And remember, you can also sort of submit to that Knowledge Hub as well. Thank you so much to all of PREPSOIL taking us through this. So let me sort of go over some of those details again. If you want to go and see the poster exhibition, it's in the cloisters. Go along, have a chat. You can read all the details there. You've got all the details there of how to sort of to get in touch with them. This is the booklet that keeps being referred to, and this is a great little sort of aid memoir of all the different areas, the regions that were being talked about, with the ideas in there of what the needs were, how different approaches would work, different assessments, different ways of looking at it. So that's the booklet. And as you leave this room, I believe we're ready with a whole stack of them to give out to people. Fantastic, lovely. So you will get that booklet. And if you don't manage to get your hands on it, if you go over to the cloisters, I'm sure they'll be able to help you as well. As always, oh, there we go. Yep, building E for the cloister for that. And I wonder whether Coletta was taking a look at that session as well and what she had to make of it. Let's have a look. Lovely, look at that. Fantastic. Lena, do you want to come and join me again? Lena, do you want to just come and have a quick look at that? Tell me what you think. What does that look like to you?
Oh, well, that's a very nice depiction of our project with the different spaces and also the soil needs assessments at the center. That's been one of the main outputs and results of the project that will now take us to the other types of work that we will be undertaking on monitoring, on connecting science to policy, but also back to these spaces and tools that we have developed for further. The
whole thing is a real circular process, isn't it?
Absolutely.
Yeah, and then sort of using that. I love the fact the brain is in the middle there. I'm pretty sure, Coletta, forgive me if I've got this wrong, but I think that's your depiction of a brain for the Knowledge Hub. Absolutely superb. Yeah. Lena, thank you very much. Thank you. It is brilliant. I'm going to set her a challenge to set me a question in the next one, I think, as well. So, ladies and gentlemen, what do we have for you now? It's time for a break. So, we've got 2 different projects for you outside. The two of the projects today, obviously funded through Horizon Europe. We have Humus, which is healthy municipal soils. They're outside, there we go. We also have ECHO, engaging citizens in soil science. So they are the two projects that you can go and get up close with and have a chat with. There is obviously also the photo exhibition, if you'd like to have another look at those. And then if we move on to what else we have for you today, a lot of breakouts. I don't know whether you want to take a photo of this agenda slide, because you can state the PREPSOIL one that's been mentioned is in this room. So they're going to go into a lot more detail, a deep dive into a couple of the examples in this room. And then you have the other breakouts as well. If you are joining us online, please remember to come back at 4:30, where we will do a wrap-up of all the breakouts for you, so that you won't miss anything. You'll get to know what everyone was talking about in the breakouts. And then obviously there's the last two sessions as well. So, ladies and gentlemen, go and grab yourselves some coffee. The breakouts will start at 11:30, and I hope you enjoy them. We'll see you back in here for everyone together at 4:30. Thank you very much. Thank you.